Some days feel off from the moment you wake up. That Tuesday in early spring was one of them. The sun had gone into hiding behind a wall of clouds so thick they seemed almost solid, like a lid pressed down on our little suburb. Wind thrashed through the trees with a violence that felt personal, stripping away the few brave leaves that had dared to bud early. Inside, my house protested against the assault. The old timbers groaned deep within the walls, and every few minutes a sharp crack would echo through the rooms, making me jump despite myself. It was the kind of day meant for thick blankets and hot cocoa, for pretending the world outside didn't exist. But Bella had other plans. My golden retriever stood by the door, leash dangling from her mouth, fixing me with that look dogs get when they've decided walks trump weather. I sighed, already mourning my warm spot on the couch. Really, girl? Today? Her tail thumped against the wall in response. The moment I stepped outside, the wind tried to steal my breath. I zipped my jacket up to my chin, hunching against the cold like it might help. Around me, tree branches whipped back and forth with such fury I could hear their wooden bones creaking. Something about their movement struck me as odd, too aggressive, too intentional. We made it halfway around the block to the old playground, its rusty swings crying out in protest against the wind. When the air changed, static electricity crackled across my skin, raising the hair on my arms. That's when Bella, my perpetually cheerful companion who once tried to befriend a raccoon, went rigid. Her ears snapped forward, and a sound I'd never heard before rumbled from deep in her chest. Not her usual protective bark, or even her rare warning growl. This was something primitive, a sound that reached back to when dogs first decided to trust humans, because the alternative was too terrible to face alone. I scanned our surroundings, but the street looked normal enough. Just dead leaves, dancing in the wind and shadows shifting beneath the trees. Then I heard the mechanical groan of a garage door. Dave emerged from his garage, wrestling with an oversized trash can. He was an odd one, Dave. Lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone else, kept to himself mostly. The kind of guy who planted garlic instead of flowers, and always seemed to know when bad weather was coming. "What's going on?" he called out, his voice tight with something that wasn't quite fear, but close enough to make my stomach clench. "I don't know," I replied, running my hand down Bella's trembling back. "Something's got her spooked." Dave's eyes darted around the street, taking in everything while trying to look like he wasn't looking at all. "Yeah, you and the whole neighborhood." He pulled his jacket closer, though I noticed his shivering didn't seem entirely due to the cold. "I'd stay inside if I was you. Keep your head down. Not a good time to be outside." He started to turn away, then stopped. "And if a stranger knocks on your door later," his voice dropped to barely above a whisper, "don't answer it." "Is there something I should know about?" The words felt heavy in my mouth. Dave's knuckles whitened against the trash can handle. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," he muttered. "Try me." But he just shook his head and started pushing the can again. "Just stay inside today. It looks like it might get pretty nasty." "Yeah," I said, tugging gently on Bella's leash. "I'll do that. I followed Dave's advice when I got home, throwing every lock and pulling every blind. Tried to lose myself in work, but couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching the house. Around noon, a knock echoed through the stillness, not from my front door, but from across the street. I rolled my office chair to the window, parting the blinds just enough to peek out. The sky had darkened to a twilight gloom despite the hour. Through the gloom, I could make out a figure at the Hendersons' door, tall, impossibly slim, wrapped in dark clothes that seemed to absorb what little light remained. But his skin glowed like moonlight on snow, with an otherworldly luminescence that made my eyes hurt. Mrs. Henderson opened her door, and something in my gut churned. "Don't let him in," I whispered, Dave's warning pounding in my head. As if he'd heard me, the stranger's head snapped toward my window. His eyes caught the light like a cat's, reflecting it back with an amber glow that paralyzed me where I sat. I jerked back from the blinds, heart hammering against my ribs. When I found the courage to look again, Mrs. Henderson's door was closing, and both she and the stranger had vanished inside. I wish I could say I listened to Dave that day, that I stayed inside, salted my doorways and minded my own business. But at 6:47 p.m., when the last traces of gray daylight were fading, I heard Mrs. Henderson scream. It wasn't a normal scream, not the kind you'd hear from someone who'd stubbed their toe or seen a spider. This was raw, cut short in a way that made every bit of melanin drain from my face. Through my kitchen window, I could see her porch light flickering madly, casting strange shadows across her windows. I knew I shouldn't go. Every horror movie I'd ever watched screamed at me to stay put. But Mrs. Henderson had brought me soup when I had the flu last winter. She'd watched Bella when I had to travel for work. I couldn't just sit there. I grabbed my phone, a flashlight, and, feeling absolutely idiotic, 3 cloves of garlic from my kitchen counter. I actually stood there for a moment, staring at the garlic in my palm, wondering if I'd finally lost my mind. Here I was, a grown man, about to face who knows what, armed with produce that belonged in a pasta sauce. But Dave's garden full of garlic kept flashing through my mind, and somehow that made it seem less insane. Almost. Bella whined as I reached for the door handle, her tail tucked between her legs, and somehow I knew she was judging my choice of weapon. "Stay," I commanded. For once, she didn't argue. The wind had died completely, leaving behind an unnatural stillness. My footsteps seemed obscenely loud on the pavement. The streetlights cast pools of sickly yellow light, but the spaces between them seemed darker than they should be, as if the shadows had substance. Mrs. Henderson's front door was open, just a crack. The porch light continued its erratic dance, and now I could hear the electric buzz of its dying bulb. Something dark stained the welcome mat. "Mrs. Henderson?" My voice sounded thin, childish. "It's Mark from next door. Are you okay?" No answer, just that incessant buzzing. I pushed the door open wider, wincing at the creak of hinges. The garlic cloves felt impossibly stupid in my sweating palm. What was I planning to do? Challenge whatever was in there to a cook-off? My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing an immaculate living room. Everything was in its place. The crocheted doilies, the antique furniture, the photos of long-dead relatives on every surface, their sepia-toned faces staring back at me with what now seemed like warning in their eyes. Then I saw the hardwood floor. Deep gouges ran across its perfectly polished surface, like something with massive claws had been dragged, or dragged itself, toward the kitchen. Suddenly, those garlic cloves didn't feel quite so ridiculous anymore. The smell hit me then, copper and rot and something else, something sweeter, like decay wrapped in perfume. My flashlight beam trembled as I followed the gouges. Mrs. Hender. I stopped. I found her sitting in her kitchen, perfectly still in her floral house dress, hands folded in her lap. Her face was pale as chalk, eyes wide and unfocused. The moment my light fell on her, she flinched as if it burned. "Mark," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You have to leave. Now." Her fingers gripped the edge of her chair until the knuckles went white. "It'll be back any moment. Please, save yourself. I'm not leaving you here." I stepped forward, still clutching my ridiculous garlic. "Come on, we need to go." A sound from the front of the house made us both freeze, wood creaking under weight, slow and deliberate. Mrs. Henderson grabbed my arm, her fingers ice cold. "Run," she breathed. We fled through the back door just as something entered through the front. I heard it knock over a lamp, heard glass shatter. Mrs. Henderson stumbled, and I caught her arm, half dragging her across her backyard. Behind us, an inhuman shriek split the night. Rage and hunger mixed into something that made my blood run cold. We sprinted across the street, Mrs. Henderson's breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear it pursuing us, not breathing hard like we were, but making a sound like silk over stone. My house seemed impossibly far away. The creature was gaining on us, and I could feel its cold presence at our backs. In desperation, I threw one of the garlic cloves over my shoulder. A horrible, inhuman screech pierced the night, followed by the sound of something massive recoiling. I almost laughed. The garlic had actually worked. Those stupid cloves I'd felt so foolish about minutes ago had just bought us precious seconds. I threw another one behind us when I heard it getting closer again, and this time the shriek was filled with rage and frustration. Maybe Dave wasn't so crazy after all. Dave's words echoed in my head. "Don't invite anyone in." I fumbled with my keys at my front door, dropping them once before finally getting the lock open. Something cold brushed the back of my neck. We dove inside together, slamming the door shut. Bella was barking now, her deep booms almost drowning out the sound of claws scraping against my door. "Please," a voice called from outside, pleasant and dreamy, like warm honey dripping into my mind. "Won't you let me in? It's so cold out here." I looked at Mrs. Henderson, huddled against my wall. She was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. The thing outside scraped its claws down my door. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," it purred, its voice no longer attempting to sound human. "I can smell your fear from here, your blood calling to me. Why don't you just open the door?" The scratching stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard other doors opening up and down Cedar Street. Soft footsteps, whispered conversations. The neighborhood was waking up. We spent that night on my kitchen floor, Bella's head in my lap, Mrs. Henderson clutching a handful of garlic like a lifeline. By morning, her house was dark and empty. She never went back. She lives with her sister in Arizona now, where the sun shines 365 days a year. I still live here. I don't have a choice. I can't afford to move, so I've learned the rules. I walk Bella during the day. I planted garlic in my garden. I never look out my windows after sunset. And when strangers knock, no matter how familiar their voices sound, I don't answer. Dave and I meet for coffee every Thursday afternoon now, leaving our house at different times, taking different routes, always at the diner 2 towns over, always when the sun is highest in the sky. We're trying to figure out how to warn others, how to protect this community without sounding like we've lost our minds. Dave thinks if we can get enough people to believe us, really believe us, we might be able to start a proper neighborhood watch. Not the kind that looks for burglars, but the kind that notices when someone's porch light is flickering out of control, or when their garden mysteriously fills with garlic overnight. The kind that recognizes the warning signs before it's too late. We've already got a few others who've seen things they can't explain, who've heard voices they know they shouldn't trust. It's not much, but it's a start. If you're reading this, maybe you've seen something too. Maybe you've noticed your neighbors only out during daylight hours, or heard voices outside your window that sound just a little too perfect. Maybe you felt that static in the air, that feeling of being watched by something that existed long before the first cities rose from the dust. If you have, reach out, find us. We're gathering slowly but surely, trading stories and warnings in sunny diners and bright cafes. Because the thing about monsters is they can only survive in the shadows as long as we stay quiet about what we've seen. And I'm done being quiet. Just remember, if you hear a knock at your door after dark, no matter how familiar the voice sounds, don't answer, and maybe plant some garlic just in case.